The ego is the system that runs your sense of self. It is made out of thought patterns, emotions, and behavioral loops, and the stories that try to hold it all together. Left unchecked, it creates endless existential searching, chronic disconnection, and the persistent sense that something is wrong. The goal of my videos is clarity, to see your identity and its contradictions for what they are, named precisely, to finally understand what it is that we're all running away from. The ego is composed to a large extent out of your memories. And your memories, if you contemplate on them, don't actually exist. They are not what they present themselves to be. They lie to you constantly, and they pretend that something that isn't real anymore still exists in actuality. A memory is always a resurrection of a moment that has nothing to do with how your current experience is actually like. And the depth of how much memory governs people's perception of things cannot be understated. If you notice, right here, right now, your conscious experience is made out of a ton of different qualia. Qualia is the sensation of a thing. It's how it feels like to be in this moment with all the different sensations clashing in on your current experience. Now notice how many of these qualias are clashing in on themselves at any given second. You cannot recreate the qualia of a past experience even 1%. That's what's so elusive about memories. You believe you have some sort of recollection about the experience, but what you actually have is impressions and meaning makings that have solidified themselves after the fact. Right now, if you try to remember something that has happened to you, your memory of the thing and the actual event are more disconnected than you can actually fathom. And to some extent, if you've had a very visceral memory, then you likely still know like the core sentiment or the core feeling behind that. And this is useful in order to like reflect on emotions and stuff. But you want to notice that the experience of the memory and your life right now are so disconnected, and the feeling that the memory belongs to you and the memory is yours in a sort of personalized way is the illusion operating. And we don't have to go that far out. Just try to think about the last 1 minute, 2 minutes. What did I say? Like, can you remember the exact sentence structure that I said? Like at the first start of this, when the video started, like the first sentence that I said, do you remember? And you likely know the sentiment or the vibe or like kind of the topic, but you don't know the exact sentence I said. It is actually very difficult to remember things that precisely. Now, maybe you actually have a good short-term memory and you do remember the exact memory precisely, but then do you know what you thought before you clicked on this video? Do you remember how you felt? Like in your body before that, or the sensations of gravity underneath your feet, or something that was itching on some part of your skin? There are so many things that flash through in an instant. And you might think, yeah, okay, but these are all kind of irrelevant experiences, right? These are like little details and they're not that relevant to my own conscious experience. But you only exist in the snap second of each of those details. Impermanence is so omnipresent that actually there is nothing but a flickering of qualia sensations. And then the ego solidifies them by believing in them as something lasting over longer stretches of time. But then what is actually going on is that you almost hear like an echo of the qualia reverberate in your own brain, in your own head, and then kind of believe something is still going on. There's something about a sensation that you experience for 0.1 seconds that you think is happening for 2 seconds, because it like echoes and reverberates. And then if you attribute meaning to that sensation, you say that this was very uncomfortable. I don't like that. I hope this doesn't happen again. Now it will be experienced as an even longer sensation. And then maybe you are going to experience the sensation when it's completely unrelated. And you might believe that somehow the negativity or the meaning behind the negativity is still following you when you are actively recreating it every moment you remember. This is very noticeable if you've ever gone through a breakup, or you have had to deal with the loss of somebody. But a breakup is still just very visceral, because in this instance, you kind of replay fights that you had with your partner in your head and try to kind of recontextualize them as if you could somehow go back into the past and change what you said in a certain moment. Or you try to figure out who truly is at fault, and you try to justify why you're not at fault. And then you might spend hours in your head trying to remember like the back and forth of a conversation. And then you might feel how flimsy it actually is, and how kind of delusional it is to still hold on to an argument that has been long gone, that nobody cares about except you in your head. Maybe the other partner as well, though. But most likely, it's just in your head, and the other person is not thinking about this at all. And what you basically do is you kind of fight not just a memory of you, but you're fighting a past identity of you. And this past identity is being fought by recreating it in the present, and then have something to argue against. And by doing so, you're creating the exact straw man you're trying to kill. And we do this by all our own kind of negative identity patterns. Like with our negative identity patterns, we want them to be gone, but we recreate them by remembering that this is how we are. And then they stay alive because we are actually resurrecting them every single time we remember. Now, at this point, you might say, okay, this all sounds kind of true. Like, yeah, of course, memory is much more like an illusion, and we reconstruct it, and this is very well known. But it's not like I am in control of my memories, right? Like, if they appear, they appear. And they do point to something quite meaningful. So it's not that they just appear because just some random point in your brain said, remember this now. But through meditation, you find out that whatever your mind comes up with in any given moment isn't random at all. There's always some sort of processing that happens in your own subconscious that is trying to be understood. And a memory oftentimes is there to remind you of something that you not have entirely processed. And memory strongly relates to thought and the way you think and how you narrate your own mind or your own life. And in a way, the deeper you understand how your brain functions and how your mind functions, the less you start to remember things and the less you start to think about yourself. There's something about self-reflection that actually ceases the more insight you gain about yourself and the more peace you gain about yourself. You might believe that you're very intelligent because you're super reflective and super self-conscious, and you're very aware of yourself. And to a certain degree, this is true because it facilitates a lot of very deep thinking. But at the end of the day, you are also still feeding the ego that keeps telling yourself that you have kind of like this solidified story that is actually real instead of a recreation at any given moment. And the implication of that is kind of deep. And I'll go deep in that later. But when you resurrect this sense of identity every time you think and you remember something, what you're actually doing is not just living in the past or just resurrecting a moment or like a memory. You are actively witnessing how the ego stays alive. It stays alive by reimagining over and over again who you are through who you have been. And this way, it always distracts you from what you actually are, which has actually no center and no self. The entire qualia system that you find yourself in has actually no localized self. There's no qualia that actually is higher in the hierarchy of things that are real than others. Like, I mean, in a relative sense, of course, you might say that a physical object is like more real than a thought or whatever, but from like the pure sensational quality of what it means to experience something, your thought is as real as the experience of light, as is the experience of sound, as is the experience of heat. All of these sensations are equally real, but memory wants to convince you that whatever you think about is more real than anything else. This is what the identification mechanism is. And this is why people get lost in thought and lost in kind of like their past when they do not understand that they are not the memories of the past. In the same way that people are not really the voice that is thinking. The identification points your attention to the past and to these memories instead of what is actually going on in the Planck second of this moment. So how small the moment is kind of what trips us up. Because if we were to really be present all the time and let the past be wherever it was, then now you cannot cling anymore to the memory, to the identity, to whoever you wanted to be or who you wish you still were. And instead you are forced to notice how nothing of it is quite real anymore. And all you're clinging to like a certain past that once was better, or you're clinging to like regretted decisions that you wish you had done differently, so now everything would be better. Like, think about how delusional they actually are. Like, in which world are you able to control time and space like this? Any sort of holding on to a moment as something to be kept over a longer period of time, like clinging to an emotion or clinging to an experience, is utterly delusional, because it is absolutely impossible. And you might be living for decades and decades and still kind of believe you could contain a moment. Like the wish that a moment never could cease or never could pass away. This is not possible. And whatever part of your mind still kind of hopes that this is possible is wrong. And it is obviously wrong. So whatever is constructing this wrong perception must be dissolved. And it cannot be dissolved by thinking about the past. And it can only be dissolved by actually experiencing what it is like to be you every single moment. And then you notice, in this very odd, paradoxical way, that you are kind of never actually gone, and you're always there. And the only way you are actually gone from the moment is by thinking about the past. It's like the past kind of brings you out from where you're actually being, and it is always in the present. The past literally doesn't exist as something that can be experienced. It is a concept that makes things make sense, that helps us to gain a sense of cause and effect and continuity. But as a lived experience, you have never spent 1 microsecond in the past. You can only construct the image of it being there. Now, the useful part of remembering the past is to notice what feelings come up with certain memories, and then using these memories to bring the feeling in the present and then focus on that feeling in the present. And this is how you actually process the past. It's not that you don't want to remember things. It's not about like forgetting that the past was real. My advice to you here isn't to just pretend that all your memories just don't matter to you, because of course they do. But it is to use the memory as a tool to experience whatever is clinging to that memory. When you go through an ego dissolution process, oftentimes a lot of memories come up and you're forced to experience the past again anyway. And sometimes way more vivid than a casual memory ever does. And then you experience whatever wasn't fully accepted back then. And this might be also a lot of joyous moments. It's not just all about sadness and grief. It can also be about like a nice childhood that you kind of wish you could go back to, and then to experience the joy again in the moment and cry about the fact that it is gone and will never return the same way, and in fact has been gone for a very long time. And the only way you can move on from the past is in the present moment. There's no other way but to experience what is going on in you now to move away from the past. And what I can say about my own personal relationship to my past is that I almost never think about it whatsoever. And I have a lot of amazing memories and a lot of horrible, traumatic memories. And I feel nothing towards them at all anymore. They are almost all dead to me because they are quite literally dead. Now, there can be stuff that could theoretically come up from the past. Like I don't know how my next like years are going to look like, especially if I go deeper and deeper into meditation and the stuff. But I like never think about the past whatsoever, at least not with like a sort of emotional connotation or nostalgia or things that I miss about it. Like I can be grateful about it, if anything. But there comes a point where you process all of your past and you're not resentful about it anymore, and you're not mourning that it is gone, and you're not wishing that it could be different, but it's completely understood as who you are. And then it's just kind of a thing that just happened, and then you forget about it. And it doesn't actually define you at all anymore. Like it is the reason for why you are how you are, but it is not what you are.